Thank you. Asanteni sana. Please be seated. Asanteni sana. Leaders from across the entire political spectrum of our nation, members of the diplomatic corps, fellow Kenyans, today we commemorate 57 years of our independence and nationhood as a people. Indeed, on this day in 1963, the Union Jack of Britain came down and we hoisted our beautiful national flag. And once again on the same day, in 1964, the Dominion of Kenya became an independent republic. And that same night, the British governor of Kenya departed from our land, marking the end of 78 years of colonial rule. Indeed, on that memorable day, the journey to create, build and nurture a nation commenced. As we celebrate our independence today, we must also pay allegiance to the two symbols of our nationhood. Both our national anthem and the national flag were gifted to us by the founding fathers as representations of our nationhood. The national anthem was composed from a Pokomo lullaby as a prayer by an expectant nation, a celebration of the fertility of our land, and a call to action whenever anything Kenyan is threatened. And this is why each time our nation gathers, our opening act is always to sing our anthem. On its part, our national flag is a symbol of our national wounds and scars that we bear from the struggle that started almost 100 years ago in the 1920s. It is a picture of battles we have fought, battles won and some lost. It is the picture of the dreams of our founding fathers, held dear, and the price they had to pay for us to realize them. Let the record reflect that our national flag is not just a piece of cloth decorated with ink or a sentimental display of colors without history. Our national flag is indeed a historical record of our nationhood, its origins, and aspirations of our founding fathers. Each time we salute and pay allegiance to the black band of our flag, we must do it as a mark of our dignity. And indeed, the struggle for independence was primarily a struggle for dignity. And dignity was not about skin color. It was about a state of mind. In their documented memories, our founding fathers did not define blackness in reference to skin color. They defined blackness as an attitude that rejected the elevation of one race over another, a state of mind that scorned at the thought of one human being could be termed better than the other because of race, class, or gender. And this is the mantra of blackness that defines us as a people to date, unifying us in our ethnic, racial, religious, and cultural diversities. We also pay homage to the red band of our national flag. It symbolizes the boldness of those who stepped into the arena, did a duty to country, and paid the ultimate price. Today we salute and acclaim these heroes of our liberation that died to give us this Jamhuri Day. Similarly, we salute and hail our fallen heroes in the defense and security forces who have paid the ultimate price in order to preserve our peace, our sovereignty, and our way of life. May the God of all creation bless the departed souls of all our heroes. May he give their families comfort and pride, knowing that the sacrifices they made are a badge of honor in the making of our nationhood. Ladies and gentlemen, we salute and pay allegiance to the green band of our national flag. It is a prayer made by our founding fathers that the future of our nation will always have plenty within our borders, and that at all times, Kenya will be a bountiful, fruitful, and fertile nation. But fundamentally, the green band on our flag is an instruction from our founding fathers for each generation to hold in trust the bounties of our nation and leave a just inheritance for our children and their children. On this day, we also salute and pay homage to the white on our national flag. This is the glue that holds all other bands together, symbolizing our unity and oneness. They remind us that although we are 44 separate nations, we are one people, a rainbow nation of many colors. The two bands of white on our national flag are therefore a symbol of our nationhood, and they remind us that whenever we hoist the national flag, we must not just see the flag, we must see the nation of many colors. But our national flag has also one more image: the shield and two spears mounted in the middle, and it is a symbol that instructs us to stand firm and defend our homeland of Kenya, the heritage of splendor, against any threats internally and externally. Fellow Kenyans, today, the day we hoisted our independence flag 57 years ago, we are called upon to reflect on the extent to which we have delivered on the dreams and aspirations of our founding fathers. They taught us that our nation is not a finished work. It will always be a work in progress. And our nationhood is not a static idea frozen in time. It is an evolving project that needs constant re-engineering. Every so often, we are called to reimagine it and adjust it to a higher ideal. To do this, we cannot be comfortable with the allure of the status quo. If indeed our nationhood is good, we must strive to make it better. And when it gets better, our children must not rest until they have moved it from better to best. The making of our nation is not a destination. It is a journey. And each generation must travel this journey and leave Kenya better than they found it. And our founding fathers taught us this by example. Indeed, in 1965, the independence government led by Jamhuri Kenyatta put its dreams on paper, and they called it sessional paper number 10 on African socialism and its application to planning in Kenya. The blueprint inspired sessional paper number 1 of 1986, the economic management for renewed growth under Mzee Daniel Arap Moi. And in June of 2003, the former President Mwai Kibaki improved on the previous development blueprints and came up with a national strategy paper known as the Economic Recovery Strategy for Wealth and Employment Creation. This strategy was a transitional running between 2003 and 2007. In the process, understood that Kenya was a work in progress. They built and improved on the platforms left by previous leaders and move our nation one step forward. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the logic behind the Big Four. Gentlemen, is the logic behind the Big Four. It is not a project, it is a process. It is a framework which I have used to organize the delivery of government services in order to improve on those who have gone for. The Big Four builds on the intentions of previous administrations. It singles out the intent that has run through our history and that are relevant today. It focuses on four intents of our liberation struggle and the aspirations of our founding fathers. The first one is liberating our people from the poverty of dignity caused by inadequate services. The second is transitioning our people, especially our youth, from being earners of wage to owners of capital, no matter how rudimentary. And this is why I am investing in the Border movement, whose plan is to build capital through a ritual of daily savings that they themselves have termed kidogo kidogo. The third is jump-starting the shift from being a country of net consumption to one of net production. And the fourth is building a holistic base of human capital that is food secure, people from the poverty of dignity, and making them health assured. A good example is the work that is being done by the Nairobi Metropolitan Service. Indeed, during one of my inspection visits to Mukuru kwa Ruben, an informal settlement here in Nairobi, okay, I was saddened to learn that 500,000 people who live there were being served by one small private health facility which had only 8 maternity beds. A woman giving birth in this facility cannot be admitted for more than 2 hours. In fact, after giving birth, she has to get out in 1 or 2 hours in order to give way for other patients. The only time she can stay for a day is if she has complications and cannot be transferred immediately to any other facility. If this is not poverty of dignity, I don't know what it is. To resolve this, I instructed the Nairobi Metropolitan Service to build 24 level 2 and level 3 hospitals in all our informal settlements here in Nairobi. And I note with satisfaction that NMS is on course to deliver these facilities by the end of January 2021. The idea is to take health services as close to the people as possible. And with the completion of the 24 new hospitals, we've increased the but nationally. And as I said during my September 24, 2020 address to the nation, on COVID-19 we have done more. When we were afflicted by the COVID-19 pandemic in March this year, we had only 8 infectious disease ICU beds countrywide. 7 days after the first COVID case was discovered, we were able to increase this capacity to 60. And today, we have 827 infectious disease ICU beds, up from 8 in March this year. During my 12th address on coronavirus pandemic, we had 7,411 isolation beds nationally. And this was achieved in only 6 months. But 3 months later, in December of 2020, this number has tripled and now stands at 20,910 isolation beds. These achievements cannot be gainsaid, and we are very grateful for the support that we have received from our county governments across the country. In fact, in a very short period of time, we have installed medical equipment never seen in this country since independence. And by March of 2020, once the Kenyatta University Hospital Integrated Molecular Imaging Center is complete, there will no longer be need for any Kenyan to travel abroad in search of specialized cancer treatment. Our capacity will handle most medical conditions that are currently being treated abroad. Coupled with the expanded county healthcare infrastructure, we intend to use our new capacity to also promote medical tourism from neighboring countries and to roll out universal health care under the Big Four program. Although we have some challenges in the health sector, we must remember that our endeavors are a work in process. Building a robust healthcare infrastructure at the county level has to go hand in hand with protecting our health workers as well. And indeed, my government is working on this. As I have said before, and I will never tire in thanking our healthcare workers for their dedication and selflessness amid the great health pandemic of our modern era. Their professionalism, excellence, and unfailing commitment to their sacred oath and their sacrifices must also be reciprocated by Kenyans acting responsibly amid the COVID-19 pandemic. On creating a robust population of owners of capital who are more than the earners of wage, my administration has made its attempts, especially during this crisis. We began by cushioning small-scale businesses through fiscal and monetary measures. These included the implementation of the 8-point economic stimulus program of some 56.6 billion. I unveiled this as part of the national response to COVID-19, and together with other fiscal policy measures, it has mitigated the adverse economic effects of the pandemic on businesses. These interventions bolstered purchasing power and increased earnings, and similarly, businesses were saved by a reduction of corporate tax rates, incentivizing them to retain their staff establishment. But fundamentally, these fiscal measures, coupled with monetary policy measures, have had a positive bank rate from 8.25% to 7% has made credit easily available to businesses. The lowering also of the cash reserve ratio from 5.25 to 4.25 has provided extra liquidity to the banking sector, and this has availed liquidity to the tune of Kenya shillings 35 billion, further enhancing greater access to credit. The dividends of these monetary policy interventions are manifest in the general reduction in the cost of credit, which now stands at its lowest rate of 11.7%, comparable to 1980, when it was 12%, thereby shattering a 40-year record. Further, my administration recognizes the significant contribution made by micro, small, and medium-sized business enterprises towards our economy. With the sector accounting for nearly 80% of our country's employment and output, it is, however, evident that a lack of adequate and affordable credit is a significant encumbrance for SMEs. Due to their inability to raise collateral, it has been difficult for these enterprises to expand and realize their full potential. Aware of this fact and working together with our commercial banks, the government has established a Kenya shillings 100 billion credit guarantee scheme to provide partial mitigation of the default risks associated with micro, small, and medium-sized businesses. The aim of this initiative is to enable those businesses and enterprises to access affordable credit and protect the jobs that they have created. To share in the benefits of the shared risk between the government and the participating banks, I urge the partnering financial institutions to levy interest at single digits on the facilities extended to micro, small, and medium enterprises under the credit guarantee scheme. Additionally, and to make it easier for our micro and small traders to engage in international trade, we have now established a dedicated transit shed at the Kenya Railways in Nairobi, dedicated as clearing points for cargo imported specifically by micro and small traders. This will not only eliminate delays in clearing of goods which lead to higher costs, but also allow easier push to market as well as joint importations. With these interventions, micro and small traders will realize higher turnovers and have an even greater opportunity to thrive and to expand. Fellow Kenyans, being mindful of the benefits of devolution to our people, my administration has strived to empower our county governments. Indeed, since the dawn of devolution in 2013, over 2.1 trillion has been dispersed to county governments in the form of equitable share from revenues raised nationally, as well as conditional allocations from the national government share of revenue, as well as proceeds of loans and grants from development partners. All these interventions have not only strengthened devolution, but also served to build local business enterprises. Regarding the Big Four aspiration of shifting Kenya from a net consumer to a net producer, as aspired by our founding fathers, we have made some good progress. To ensure that Kenyan exports continue to have access to foreign markets, as a government, we have successfully concluded negotiations for an economic partnership agreement with the United Kingdom that will secure long-term duty-free and quota-free access to the UK for our products. To expand the frontiers and opportunities for our people, negotiations are also underway for a free trade agreement with the United States of America, and once concluded, that free trade agreement will be the first between the US and a country in sub-Saharan Africa. And as testament that this is a shift in a profitable direction, earnings from tea from January 2020 to October 2020 placed Kenya as the third largest tea producer in the world. As we seek to diversify our agricultural portfolio, we have also supported new cash crops, such as avocado, where we are now the 7th largest producer globally and the top country on the African continent. But fellow Kenyans, we cannot achieve all of this if we do not have a holistic base of human capital. And you cannot build a nation without building its people first. A holistic nation is one that is secure in the basic needs: food security, safe drinking water, decent housing, quality education are basic needs that are critical planks of the Big Four. On food security, the country is slowly inching towards sufficiency. As of this year, maize production is projected to rise by 12.7%, while that of potatoes is projected to go up by 19.8%. Regarding safe drinking water, I believe the record is even better. When we started the Nairobi Metropolitan Service, for instance, we learned that each household in our informal settlements consumes an average of 80 liters of water per day at an average price of Kenya shillings 40 per day. Water consumption alone represented about 10% of the daily earnings of settlement dwellers. I then instructed the Nairobi Metropolitan Service to sink 93 boreholes, which they did in 100 days, so that we can provide free water to the settlement dwellers. The demand for this service pushed us to sink an extra 100 boreholes, bringing our total boreholes in the Nairobi metropolitan area to a total of 193. These boreholes have the capacity to produce 41 million liters of water per day and are currently serving 2 million informal settlement dwellers with free water. Collectively, this saves them millions of shillings, liberating their finances for better use. And this is how transformative the work of the Nairobi Metropolitan Service has been to the residents of our nation's capital. But nationally also, we are on course to foster access to safe water. And by 2021, the national water coverage will stand at 80%, while sewage coverage will be at 40%. In 2021, the area under irrigation will be approximately 450,000 acres, significantly boosting our agricultural output. Regarding land and housing, only yesterday, I assented into law the Sectional Properties Bill, which seeks to deepen the reforms that we are undertaking in the land sector, thus improving the vibrancy of land as a factor of prosperity and development in Kenya. By promoting sectional ownership, we are empowering many more Kenyans to own homes by reducing the unit cost of housing, especially in our urban areas where land pressures are highest. Further, fueling a sector that continues to redefine the skyline of our cities and townships across the country. On education, as a critical plank of a holistic population, we have done a lot. But because of the challenges of COVID-19, we have been slowed down. And that is why the Ministry of Education, in consultation with the Ministry of Health, has developed sector-specific protocols and guidelines to facilitate the reopening of all learning institutions. We remain on course for the resumption of learning in all classes effective the 4th of January 2021, with the safety of our young learners being our top priority. In that regard, and in line with the policy of the government on universal and compulsory basic education for all children of up to 18 years, all parents and guardians are required to facilitate their children to resume their learning in January of next year. To ensure compliance with this directive and to guarantee that no child is left behind, I hereby order and direct as follows: that the Ministry of Interior and Coordination of National Government shall, through all chiefs and assistant chiefs, account for all children within the jurisdiction of those officers and also ensure that all children report back to school in January of 2021. That the Ministry of Education shall receive reports from all primary and secondary schools in Kenya, regardless of the system of education they deliver, on the identity and details of any child or children who have not reported back to school as directed. And that the Ministry of Education shall reissue and publicize the education policy on school re-entry so as to facilitate the readmission of all of those who may not be able to report due to pregnancy. Fellow Kenyans, I have spoken a lot today about our history and our nationhood, and I have given an account of where I believe we are today. But now you must allow me to talk a little bit about the future. The future of any nation is built on its history. And this is so because history is a faithful compass to the future. Indeed, one statesman once said, and I quote, that the further backward we look, the further forward we are likely to see, end of quote. When the Founding Fathers put our nation together, they did it by entering into a nationalist covenant. And this covenant was an unwritten understanding on what they believed to be good for Kenya. It was a dream and a prayer, but above all, it was the embodiment of the spirit of our nation. It bound one to all and all to one. And it demanded that all of us pay duty and allegiance to this informal agreement. Then at Lancaster House in the 60s, early 60s, this unwritten covenant between the 44 nations of Kenya was put on paper as our independence constitution. But our founding fathers cautioned us that what was put on paper was the letter of the Constitution, and it must never become more important than the spirit behind a constitution. They further emphasized that the spirit of our Constitution was justice, and that justice was also the spirit of God. The guiding light for our nation must therefore always remain the spirit of justice. And when the spirit behind our Constitution disagrees with the letter used to write it, then we must change the letter. Our founding fathers believed that Kenya will become a great nation if we serve only the spirit behind our Constitution. If we become prisoners to the unbending and time-bound letter of the Constitution, we will invite discord and chaos in the midst of our nation. And this is because Kenyans are not made to serve the Constitution. The Constitution is made to serve Kenyans. So, fellow Kenyans, if change is indeed inevitable at appointed intervals, how shall we discern the moments that call for change? How can we know that our nationhood is in crisis and that the letter of our Constitution is out of touch with the spirit of our nation? We must go back to lessons from Lancaster and use history as our compass. And our founding fathers taught us to discern such moments. They taught us that you have a constitutional moment when the soul of the nation is constantly in turmoil and there is national instability every 5 years because of an election. This is a sign that the nation is on edge, is on the verge of a new constitutional frontier. Ladies and gentlemen, if it takes an incredible 123 days to conduct an election, or 1/3 of a year, like we did in 2017, this is a sign that the moment calls for change. If our country loses 1 trillion shillings during this 123 days of electioneering, or an equivalent of 1/3 of our national budget. This is a sign that a moment of reckoning is approaching. And if for every 5 years we lose life and property, including of our young ones, this is a pointer that there is a problem that needs fixing. It is a sign that the letter of our Constitution has become rigid and not in tandem with the deep-seated aspirations of our people. My question to our nation, therefore, is this: what is wrong in trying to fix such anomalies? If Kenyans are not made to serve the Constitution, but the Constitution is made to serve Kenyans, why imprison ourselves with models that are not working? Why run an election for 123 days with the potential of having to extend it to 1 year if the results are nullified and repeated like happened to some of us? And why drain 1 trillion shillings in losses, or an equivalent of 1 billion shillings every working hour, electing a leader for 123 days? Our founding fathers urged us to aspire for constitutions of hope and to reject constitutions of fear. A constitution that elicits compliance by creating fear can only cause disturbance to the soul of the nation. And indeed, when we adopted the 2010 Constitution, we must be frank that most of us were driven by fear. Our national spirit had been wounded, and we were afraid of repeating the 2007 post-election violence. But in running away from one crisis, we may have possibly created another. And I believe now is the moment to correct this and make a shift from a constitution of fear to a constitution of hope. A constitution that ensures our nation remains stable and therefore attractive to both local and foreign investors. Fellow Kenyans, the BBI proposes amendments to our constitution to give Kenyans hope for a better nation. It seeks to align the spirit of our nation with the letter of our Constitution, so that obedience to the Constitution is driven by hope and not fear. BBI intends to complete what was started when we adopted the 2010 Constitution and promised to change it later. In fact, the BBI is the driver of the first amendment to the 2010 Constitution. And BBI is not a one-size-fits-all that promises to settle all the constitutional questions through a singular amendment. It is the start of a continuous process of constitution making for our young nation. Even our founding fathers had to freeze certain thorny issues at independence in the hope that subsequent constitution-making processes would resolve them. Their logic then and my rationale today is a constitution is a living document and it cannot be rigid. And to build our nationhood, we must embrace the ideal of a continuous process of constitution making. BBI will not resolve all our constitutional grievances of the day. It is just the first. It only attempts to make the 2010 Constitution better. And as we improve in it, we must remember that going into the future, there will be a second amendment and a third, and many more as our young nation grows. So we must therefore be guided by the spirit of the First Amendment to the 2010 Constitution as we deliberate the BBI proposals. It is a discerning spirit that seeks to align our national aspirations with the letter of our Constitution. And to be discerning, the spirit of the First Amendment has to be a questioning one. The spirit of the First Amendment is also a spirit of inclusion, co-creation, and justice. On the spirit of inclusion, it does not augur well when at the top you have only two individuals in the form of the president and the deputy president. More so in an ethnically diverse nation as ours. This creates an environment of political exclusion, resulting in the cyclical violence that we have witnessed in every election. We can increase these positions in order to make the leadership of the country that much more inclusive. This, by the way, was the Kofi Annan consensus of February 2008 that gave us peace. And if it worked then, it means there was something right about it. And yes, 5 positions at the apex of the executive means that some people will be left out. And that is why BBI proposes to introduce the position of leader of the official opposition that was successful under former constitutional dispensations. If the opposition carries a large portion of the country and the winner in an election carries another, isn't there therefore a compelling argument? And is it not in the national interest to give official recognition to the opposition and support his office in the form of a shadow cabinet? An expanded executive and constitutional recognition of the opposition will reduce the notion of political scarcity and the propensity for election violence every 5 years. Similarly, it will enhance the doctrine of a constitution of hope over a constitution of fear. The spirit of the First Amendment is also a spirit of co-creation, and this is demonstrated by the system of devolution I talked about earlier, which is one of the brilliant designs of the 2010 Constitution. The devolved system was engineered by the framers of our Constitution to be a system where the national government co-creates solutions with county governments. And the fight against COVID-19 has demonstrated the power of this partnership. The First Amendment therefore proposes to strengthen this model of co-creation by doing 3 things. 1, increasing funding allocated to counties by the national government from 15% to 35%. More money to the counties means more money to the people. 2, creating a ward fund. And the intention here is to take development as close to the people as we can. But the third element of co-creation is probably the most compelling. We cannot co-create the devolved system if it is just dominated by men. Devolution without women is like a seedless field where nothing grows. And that is why the First Amendment proposes a 50-50 sharing of Senate by men and women. If 50% of Senate will be made up of women, their contribution to a robust devolved system will be felt. And this means that they will control half of the Senate decisions, including how the upscale 35% of national resources sent to the counties will be spent. And that is why we must ask the following question. Who loses if women control 50% of the Senate, its resources and its decisions? Is strengthening devolution through a 50-50 co-creation formula between men and women good for the country? I believe so. And does this formula support a constitution of fear, or does it create a constitution of hope? The spirit, therefore, of this First Amendment is also a spirit of justice. And by this I mean justice in representation and justice under the law. Justice in representation is also about inclusion. Every Kenyan must have a just and fair avenue for participation in the actions of his or her government. This is not a luxury. It is at the core of our democratic ethos. And that is why the First Amendment proposes to align in our representation model to ensure that everyone is accommodated justly. Justice under the law is about the judiciary as the third arm of the government. And to ensure that the will of justice spins fairly for all, and to reduce the distance between the disadvantaged and the law, the judiciary must in one way or another be subjected to the will of the people. It must have an oversight body that is a direct expression of the spirit of the nation. If the executive and parliament, which are also arms of government, are a direct expression of the will of the people, who is the judiciary accountable to? Where are the judicial checks and balances located outside of the Judicial Service Commission, led and dominated by officers of the court. The First Amendment proposes the setting up of an independent office of a judiciary ombudsman to oversight judicial action on behalf of the people of Kenya. And with this formula, the people win and the distance between the disadvantaged and the law is reduced. So, fellow Kenyans, as I end my address today, I appeal to all within our nation to unshackle our nationhood from bondage of fear and to boldly seize this moment of opportunity and hope. It is a time to embrace hope. In a triumph of hope over fear, in March of 2018, I began the journey of improving our nationhood by extending a handshake to the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. The handshake was a temporary solution to a long-term search. Our joint intention was to have BBI provide us with a roadmap for a long-term solution. And even then, this solution was not to become an end in itself. It was meant to be a continuous work in progress. More so because at the core of the handshake were the words of Prophet Isaiah, where he declared, "Come, let us reason together." This mantra of rivals reconciling and reasoning together in the interest of the nation is what led to BBI. And if this handshake endures, I anticipate it will become a new normal, and many future BBIs and handshakes will continue to refine our nationhood and ensure that we dwell in unity, peace, and liberty. Indeed, in pondering this initiative of reconciliation, we are also further inspired by the teachings of St. Francis of Assisi, when he said, "Start by doing what is necessary. Then it will lead you to what is possible, and before you know it, you will find yourself doing the impossible." The handshake was necessary as a first step to national healing and constitutional alignment. BBI was construed as a possible next step towards reinforcing our nationhood. And once we accomplish the necessary and the possible, then the impossible effortlessly becomes our reality. I plead on to all Kenyans, especially our political leaders, let us not lose this opportunity. Let us take full advantage of this opportunity to further strengthen our nationhood, our unity, and the prosperity of our people. So, fellow Kenyans, as we come to the end of what has been an incredibly difficult year, let us exercise caution, more so as we interact with family. As we seek sanctuary in family, let us remember that COVID is real. Men, women, old and young are dying. The best gift that we can give to our loved ones this Christmas is the gift of life today and the promise of hope and a joyful tomorrow. Fellow Kenyans, Merry Christmas. Stay home, stay safe, and together let us pray for a new year that sees an end to COVID-19 and delivers us a bright and prosperous 2021. May God bless you all, and may He bless this great land and nation. Asanteni sana. Thank you.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Rais. Naomba kwa heshima